Hello everybody. Today is December 26th, 2021, and my name is Ralph Schultz. Welcome to my broadcast from New Mexico, United States of America. I wish all of you a happy and peaceful holiday in whatever your religion or beliefs. We all need to pause and reflect in our lives from time to time. It's very important. Prazdnikom Tibia. Happy holidays to you in Russian. You can see I have a University of Texas sweatshirt on. You could look at it. The Texas Longhorns. Texas is that country that's next to the United States. It's one of the biggest countries in the world, according to Texans. And my son gave this to me. He lives in Austin, Texas, one of the capitals of the world. And it's right next door to New Mexico. And Texas is like a large country unto itself. You can just listen to one of their favorite songs.
The eyes of Texas are upon you all the livelong day. The eyes of Texas are upon you, you cannot get away. Do not think you can escape them at night or early in the morning. The eyes of Texas are upon you till Gabriel blows his horn.
So today I will continue my video 3, reading from my book, pages 65 to 69, this is about the Soviet Russian state, the KGB, and an individual, Dr. Sergey Russian. He's a renowned Russian political scientist, and he has been a former advisor to President Putin and some of his ideas about the United States. Here's a copy of my book again, just so you know what it is. And for all subscribers, all 10,000 of you, if you send me your email address I will email you a free desk digital copy of the book. It's not an ebook, but you can save it, and it's saved to the Google Drive, which means it doesn't use your memory, and you can look at it any time in living color, and I'll see all the pictures and everything very clearly. You can even forward it to most other emails addresses. You could send it to 1,000 people, or just one person, or save it for yourself. And I think this is something, just send me an email to the email address that's about to appear in a moment on this screen. That's an email that's dedicated only to the book itself, so no one's going to see this except me, and I'll send it out to you. Here it is. Okay, well, not much has occurred in the Ukrainian-Russian NATO front in the last week. There's been a lot of conversations, a lot of news stories, but both sides continue to emphasize their red lines, and I believe there is a possibility of some type of summit-like personal meeting in Switzerland between President Putin and President Biden in January. That remains to be seen. Here we have two conflicting views. Russia emphasizing historical connections to Ukraine. They consider it its cousin, and the real politic of the situation, and NATO and the USA with an ideological viewpoint based on international law and sovereignty of the nation, regardless of the overall impact on the balance of power. They're both entrenched, and it's kind of difficult for me to see how they're going to come to any resolution, but we'll see what happens. Okay, so now I'm going to read from the book. Stay awake now. If you're academic, you'll like this. If you won't, you'll probably be deleting me and moving on to something more entertaining. But this is not entertainment. This is knowledge. It's power. That's what I'm about. Okay, just a little entertainment. So I'm going to pick up where we left off. I was talking about what the situation had happened to numerous invasions in Russia, okay, over the century since 1600. So after World War II, 20 million Russian civilians and 8 million soldiers were Soviet soldiers were killed, and who knows how many other non-killed casualties there were, plus the entire population is terrified. Just think of that, 100 million, 200 million people. So it didn't end at the end of World War. We'll go back to World War I for a second. At the end of World War I, the Civil War continued for 3 years within Russia at the time. This is before the Soviet Union was created. There was a counter-revolution put on by a group called the Whites, which were the Democrats, so to speak, favorable by the West, and the Bolsheviks, the Reds, who wanted to create a communist, Leninist, Marxist revolution. Okay, and the Bolsheviks, after 3 years, won out basically. Okay, what happened though is that we had they thoroughly reinvigorated the Tsarist Russia population, though there were a lot of casualties as we got into the Stalinist era. Okay, so in an attempt to perpetuate the socialist revolution, Marxism was originally a response to the terrible working conditions of the new factories built during the industrialization of Russia and Europe from 1840 to 1915. Russia was a rapidly industrializing country. This set the conditions for the Russian Revolution. Marx was idealistic. He was really a dreamer and a philosopher, and believed in a workers' paradise in which the state would wither away. Well, the opposite occurred. Russia became a tightly controlled state ruled by the Communist Party elite, the new royalty, and people suffered because they had so few consumer goods, and because the state economic planners, they had a 5-year Gauss plan, which is state plan, emphasized industrial development and military defense in an attempt to catch up to the West and build a prosperous and advanced socialist country. However, it is important to note the communist state began with a very uneducated population of peasant farmers and industrial workers trapped in extremely harsh working conditions and with very low wages and benefits, called the proletariat. The Soviet Union created an excellent educational system with a very high literacy rate, 99.7%. It built substantial housing units and provided free, good health care for millions of working people. There were no homeless, and everyone was given a job, no matter how minor. Crime rates were very low. When I was there in 1968, I saw a woman drilling a concrete pavement street pothole. Women were also educated and became an important part of the professional workforce. Accountants, engineers, doctors, teachers. I have a Facebook friend, Anya, who is an architect, studied higher mathematics, and was a member of the Young Pioneers, that's a Soviet youth organization, in the 1980s, and plays the violin. Her family were scientists, professors, and a high-level Soviet Red Army officer. Another friend is a retired accountant and factory operations analyst. Svetlana, my Russian friend in Moscow, was educated an engineer and worked on optics research for the Soviet government on satellites. Look at the advanced Soviet rocketry program technology ahead of the West at the time. As I said, the Soviet Union had the first cosmonaut, Yuri Gagarin, and the first life form launched and returned in a rocket onto Earth, the dog Laika. The first satellite in orbit, Sputnik. And today, the Russian Soyuz space launch rocket takes U.S. astronauts to the orbiting International Space Station, of which U.S. astronauts utilize for research. USA space rocket transport rent is over $500 million a year. This is a good example of the U.S. underfunding NASA and scientific education. In 1957, the USA was in a panic that it was behind Russia and the USSR and began a massive science educational program. Unfortunately, Russia also had to create a massive military as part of the arms race in European NATO and the United States. It is also too complex to plan an economy so tightly because it emphasizes or suppresses the benefits of a free market responding to the laws of supply and demand. Shortages occur, and many goods and machinery became of poor quality, as in the Soviet Union. In 1992, at the end of the Soviet Union era, it was said that they had the largest industrial base in the world, but also the most outmoded and old and inefficient. The free market system does it better, but it has its flaws. Today, Russia is a capitalistic, nationalistic country. There is also my Facebook friend, Victor, who is for world peace and takes the Russian point of view on foreign policy. He lives in Belarus. and I've known him for 6 years, I believe. So let's not forget, the USSR Russia built this huge industrial base from practically nothing, starting in 1946. Dams, electrical power grids, railroads, highways, schools, hospitals, cities. But the Cold War took its toll, and it kept the Russian people in a perpetual state of fear of being destroyed by Western Europe and the U.S. NATO. After all, U.S. nuclear-armed B-52 bombers and nuclear-armed Polaris submarines were minutes away from the Russian border, constantly on duty, waiting to be ordered to drop nuclear weapons on Russian cities and military installations. Now, I wrote this 3 years ago, and at the time I said there still are, I believe, some U.S. military jets flying near the Russian border to remind Russia that they can be attacked if necessary. And some recent maneuvers is a complaint Russia has towards NATO, that some things that occurred in the last few months. So that's, Russia also does flybys of NATO facilities. It's kind of in response to this. They play this back and forth game, but it's not really a game, is it? A while ago I saw on a YouTube video, a valid one. In fact, it was filmed, by a legitimate video photographer. The USS Destroyer, the USS Cook, armed with sophisticated, powerful missiles and communications equipment, steamed towards the Russian naval port in Crimea. It did not respond to Russian messages to explain their purpose and turn around. Russia flew some jets overhead very close by and reported in the U.S. news as a Russian threat, no mention of the U.S. Cook mission. And then Russia armed their cruise missiles and aimed or locked on to the U.S. ship. The U.S. naval ship turned right around and headed out of the Black Sea. The U.S. ship was another warning to Russia to back off Ukraine and intimidate the Kremlin. Also to boost the morale and will of Ukraine to fight Russia. They have some support behind them. So the U.S. had to use nuclear weapons, remember, in 1945 with Japan. We're the only nation to do so, and this fact has not been forgotten by many countries. It was not until the 1970s that the USSR had a nuclear capability that could match the USA. And by the way, in 1986, Russia had 40,000 large nuclear warheads compared to the USA with 24,000. Of course, you can't use them all. In 1965, the U.S. had 30,000 compared to Russia with only 5,000 warheads. Now each country has about 5,000 or so, which are at least 100 times more powerful than Hiroshima, if you can believe it, each one. Okay, one blast in a city the size of Orlando, Florida, or Smolensk, Russia, would be entirely incinerated. The total line at annihilation, kaboom. About 750 to 1,000 are actually deployed and immediately ready to be used by the U.S., and Russia is probably about the same. The other 4,500 are stored underground and disarmed, but they can leak radiation, and they're kind of a threat in a way, a parody. And as part of the Russian defense, Russia also had developed a superb intelligence service, which was called the KGB, or KGB. It was like the entire USA, FBI, CIA, NSA, DIA put together. This is a Central Intelligence Agency, National Security Agency, and others. The budget is about $80 billion today, plus $40 billion for Homeland Security. Now the KGB is divided into two divisions, the SVR, which is like foreign, which means the CIA, and the FSB, domestic, which is the equivalent of the FBI. And it's supposedly being combined back into one organization. It is interesting to note that the KGB was a very elite agency that selected only top students and motivated loyal people as members. Then and now they consider themselves protectors of Mother Russia and the country's well-being. They are and were the watchers who made sure the country stayed on course. It was an honor to be a member. Through upheavals and changes since 1982, it has stayed the course and had a continuous autonomous existence, almost like a shadow government. Many of its high-ranking officials and members are also involved in their dual roles as executives in private industry. There is somewhat of a flow back and forth. Some are closely connected to the central government. Generally, they are called Siloviki, which means force group. They are or have been members of the military, including military intelligence, which is known as the GRU, and the other intelligence agencies. They are intertwined with the Russian government and some key large corporate entities. The USA has some similarities, but my hunch is the Russian security is more closely tied to nationalism and protecting the state. I don't think we should ever underestimate Russia, which I think is being done today by many countries and organizations. After communism ended in 1992, Russia became a wide-open, disorganized state in which all state property was auctioned off at very low prices. These people are called oligarchs, and we have the same thing with our wealthy people and high tech and so on. But there were no democratic traditions, guidelines, and civil courts and laws to regulate business. High inflation wiped out people's savings and pensions in the 1990s, and very high unemployment put the population in a very distressed situation. Many salaries are not paid for months, including the military and civil service. We're in the 1990s, what I'm talking about. The military was in disarray with equipment outdated and needing much maintenance. All of this was called shock therapy by the West to quickly transition Russia from a structured socialist state to a westernized capitalistic economy and political system. American financial institutions and consultants like Goldman Sachs helped implement this policy and reaped huge benefits. Privatization of state business assets enhanced the immense concentration of wealth into the hands of these Russian oligarchs and neglected the welfare of most of the Russian people. This created resentment against the United States. The Russian economy collapsed in 1998 and income and wealth decreased substantially. The currency collapsed. The country was basically like our Great Depression. The Russian people could not understand why America did not help them to survive this horrible period. All this changed after President Putin was elected in 2000. The economy has been rebuilt with a healthy consumer sector based upon free market principles. The Russian government bureaucracy has substantially increased. This seems like a throwback to the Soviet Union, but it also creates a loyal following of newly hired professional people. There is some interconnection between large corporations and government policies. Oligarchs have had their independent power reduced by President Putin. Russia is now exerting its influence around the world and on its borders as in the past, centuries have passed. It has created a multipolar world on a level with China and the USA. It is thought Russia has increased its agents in the USA since the Soviet era. I heard from 1,000 to 2,000. I'm not sure what those numbers really indicate and what an agent is. The number of Russian Federation domestic government employees, as I said, has substantially increased. A recent book, an article by a Russian political science and advisor to President Putin, Dr. Sergey Russian, suggested the USA has been in disarray and losing its power since 1994. That is when the huge divide began in earnest in U.S. politics, liberals versus conservatives. He has been an advisor to President Putin and now is dean of the elite Moscow Higher School of Economics and chairman of the Council on Foreign and Defense Policy. I saw him on CNN TV being interviewed by Fareed Zakaria and have read one of his scholarly articles. Dr. Karaganov explains Russia is strategically concerned about military deterrence being adequate to deter outside aggression. That is also why Russia wants friendly buffer countries like Belarus, Ukraine, Georgia, and Finland along their border. Keep in mind the U.S. has many, perhaps 25 or more military bases of size surrounding Russia and China. Russia has 4 naval bases, and only 2 are outside its borders, and they are small. The expansion of NATO to 28 countries since 1992 is a tremendous source of concern. So why is there NATO except to deter or intimidate Russia, goes Russian thinking. You know, in 1989, when Russian President Gorbachev opened up East Germany, the U.S. President George H. Bush promised not to expand NATO eastward. That didn't last long. Presidents Clinton, Bush, and Obama added many countries to NATO, or encouraged their approval. That is a major existential threat to Russia, which U.S. newscasters and experts refuse to acknowledge. Also in 2002, President George Bush unilaterally terminated the Anti-Ballistic Missile Defense Treaty, the ABM Treaty, which had been signed by Henry Kissinger and President Nixon in the 1970s. The U.S. then put advanced anti-ballistic missile systems into Poland and Romania, and more are forthcoming. That's in the last few years, recently. This upsets the balance of power. This was under the guise of defending Europe from an Iranian missile attack. That will take many years to develop, that effective Iranian technology, if ever. If developed, Israel will take it out. It sure looks like a defense against Russian missiles, which will give NATO a tremendous advantage and make Russia militarily vulnerable. This perpetuates an arms race which is dangerous. Russia offered to work together to build a mutual anti-ballistic missile system in the southern border near Iran, but the U.S. refused to consider it. But we must remember the Eastern Europeans fear Russia, after seeing the brutal Stalinist period in the 1930s and the tight control of them by Russia as members of the Warsaw Pact, the strict economic plans that reduced their economic freedom, and the fear of secret police keeping track of people critical of the Soviet communist state. Russia has a powerful military and cyber capability, so it is viewed as a threat. These new NATO nations take comfort being aligned with the powerful Western European nations in the USA. And may I say, it's really the USA. It's the USA or nothing, okay? Norway, France, Germany, they have no military effectiveness against Russia. They're counting on the USA to do all the work and pay for everything. Let's face it. Let's be honest. So the USA provides national security just in case something goes wrong in foreign policy, and you never know when it will. So that's all for today. I appreciate talking to you, and I'll be talking to you with a new video soon. Good day.